Most people think they're living their life. But Jung would tell you something far more honest. You're living a script you didn't write. A role chosen for you before you had language, before you understood the world, before you knew what you needed. You grow up believing you're choosing freely, choosing your partners, choosing your reactions, choosing your path. But underneath all of it, something else is choosing for you. Something older. Something quieter. Something you weren't allowed to express. Jung called it the shadow. What is the shadow? It's the part of you that holds everything you had to hide to survive. Your anger you weren't allowed to show. Your sadness that was mocked. Your needs that were dismissed. Your softness that was shamed. Your truth that was too heavy for others. These parts don't disappear. They don't dissolve with age. They don't fade with time. They sink underground. And from there, they begin directing the show. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is how the loop begins. A childhood wound writes the first draft. A coping role becomes your mask. And the world becomes the theater where that same emotional story repeats itself in new costumes again and again. Different faces. Different places. Same ache. Same emptiness. Same ending. It feels like déjà vu, but it's not memory, it's repetition. The shadow director calling for another scene. Every wound wants recognition. And so it recreates the same situations until you finally stop and see what you once could not face. Most people never see it. Most people think the loop is life. They blame themselves. They blame others. They blame destiny. But the truth is simpler. And heavier. You're not trapped in your life. You're trapped in your role. The pleasing one. The strong one. The responsible one. The invisible one. The one who never gets chosen. The one who always gets left. The one who keeps performing long after the stage has emptied. Jung warned us, the persona, the mask, can become so rigid that we forget we are wearing it. It protects you. But it also confines you. You start mistaking the role for your identity. You start calling the loop your personality. You start living through reflex instead of truth. And somewhere inside, a quiet voice whispers, "This isn't me." But the mask has been worn for so long it feels like skin. You wake up one morning and realize you're exhausted. Not because life is hard, but because the performance is. Acting calm. Acting fine. Acting unaffected. Acting strong. Acting like you don't know exactly why this pattern hurts you. And this is where the first crack appears. A moment so subtle it almost seems meaningless. But something shifts. A conversation you can no longer pretend through. A boundary you can't swallow anymore. A truth you can't keep quiet. A feeling you can't bury. The shadow feels this. Because for the first time, you're not following the script. And the show begins to glitch. People react differently. Old comforts no longer comfort. The familiar starts feeling too tight. Life begins to whisper, "Look. Look closer." You start seeing the repetition with unnerving clarity. This person reminds you of someone. This dynamic feels ancient. This emotion feels older than your adulthood. Because it is. It belonged to the child you once were. The child who had no choice but to adapt. Awareness breaks the spell. When you see the loop, you are no longer unconscious inside it. You feel the weight of every unspoken emotion that has been steering you from the shadows. Not out of malice, but out of memory. Because the shadow isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying to protect the wounded parts you had to abandon. But protection is not living. And you can feel that. In the heaviness. In the recurring sorrow. In the quiet loneliness. In the way you go to bed each night with a version of yourself you haven't met fully yet. There is a moment in every human life when the show stops making sense. When your lines feel foreign. When your role feels tight. When the performance becomes unbearable. That moment is the beginning of consciousness. The moment the light touches the shadow. The moment your real self pushes against the script. And before we continue, if this resonates with you, Please like the video and subscribe for more reflections like this. Thank you for your support. When you return, hold this truth gently: you are not the character you were taught to play. And you never were. Once the illusion cracks, you can't go back. You can't unknow what you've seen. You can't unfeel what has awakened. You can't force yourself into a role your soul has outgrown. This is the moment Jung described as the beginning of individuation, the slow, courageous process of becoming who you truly are instead of who you had to be. But before you become whole, you meet the one who has been directing your life from the dark. The shadow steps forward. Not dramatically, not violently, but quietly, as a memory, as a pattern, as a sudden clarity you can't explain. It shows you the truth you avoided. The real reason you're drawn to certain people. The real reason you shrink in certain moments. The real reason you tolerate what breaks you. The real reason you choose versions of love that feel like the past wearing a new face. You realize something heavy: you haven't been choosing. You've been reenacting. Repeating the emotional atmosphere of your earliest years, hoping, this time, it will end differently. Hoping someone will finally stay. Hoping someone will finally see you. Hoping someone will finally love the parts you were forced to bury. But you cannot fix old wounds with new people. That hope is the loop. And once you see it, the shadow becomes unmistakable. It shows up in your defensiveness. In your silence. In the stories you tell yourself. In the way you sabotage connection when you're scared of being abandoned. In the way you chase intensity when you're terrified of emptiness. In the way you push away love that feels too steady because you don't trust peace. Jung said that the shadow holds everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. Not just the darkness, but the light too. Your strength, your intuition, your boundaries, your voice, your self-worth, your sensitivity, your depth, your capacity for love. All of it buried in the same place as the pain. And this is why meeting the shadow is overwhelming. Because you're not just facing what hurt you. You're facing what you abandoned in yourself. For a long time, you resist this confrontation. You blame others. You cling to the familiar. You stand in the wreckage of old patterns, hoping they'll magically become safe. But the moment arrives when you can no longer lie to yourself. You hear yourself say, "This is hurting me." And you believe it. You feel your heart whisper, "I can't live like this anymore." And you listen. You feel your truth rising with a strength you didn't know you had. And you allow it. This is where the show collapses. Where the script falls apart. Where the old identity loosens. Where the facade cracks open and light floods in. It's not sudden. It's not cinematic. It's not a single moment of awakening. It's a slow shedding. A quiet unraveling. A gentle rebellion against your old self. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop betraying your own heart for roles that were never yours. And something extraordinary happens. The loop loses its power. The people who once pulled you in no longer feel magnetic. The situations that once trapped you no longer hold your attention. The patterns that once defined you begin to dissolve. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The shadow stops directing the show the moment you turn toward it instead of away from it. You realize you don't have to fear it. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to exile it. You only have to witness it. To let it speak. To let it show you what you've been carrying alone for too long. And as you face it, you retrieve something precious: yourself. Your unperformed self. Your unmasked self. Your unedited self. The self beneath all roles. The self that existed before the world told you who to be. This is the moment the real story begins. When you stop living a loop and start living a life. When you stop repeating the past and start creating the future. When you stop surviving and begin becoming. Thank you for being here with me. Take care of your heart. And may love always guide your path.